Batu, Barada, Nikto.
You must remember those words.
Gordon's alive.
You know what the Turing test is?
I know Kung Fu.
Dead or alive, you are coming with me.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Stories Out of Time and Space. I'm your regular host, Scott Weatherly, and as always, I'm joined by Julian Darius. Julian, how are you doing? You okay?
Must podcast.
That's how I feel every day. I'm just a podcasting machine specially made for a mutant version of the human race that's going to come along. Today, we are getting to the fourth Doctor. We're into the Tom Baker years and our bonus series looking at all classic Doctor Who. And if we're going to be doing Tom Baker, there was only one story really that could really be done. Today we're going to be talking about Genesis of the Daleks. Couple of things. So I've actually watched it on DVD today. Tom Baker as the Doctor, Elizabeth Sladen as Sarah Jane Smith, and Peter Miles as Nydir. And I haven't got the full list in. And they have Harry as well as the companion, whose name I don't have. But let's be clear, rather ineffectual in this story, if I'm perfectly honest.
Yeah, he's not. Yeah, Harry Sullivan. I'm forgetting who. Yeah.
I think I might. Let me just check because I've got the book in here as well. Here you go. This is terrible podcasting, but there you go.
Ian Martyr plays him.
There you go. Yeah, it doesn't even appear anywhere in the the book, which is how important he is to this story. There you go. Genesis of the Daleks. So let's have a quick sort of a bit summary before we go in. So the Doctor and his two companions, Sarah Jane Smith and Harry, are pulled to a planet called Skaro by a fellow Time Lord, one of the Time Lord sort of rulers. And the Doctor is given a time ring to allow him to return, but he is told that this is a moment in time when he has the opportunity to go back and stop the creation of the Daleks. He is on the planet of Skaro, where there is a war going on between the Thals and the Kaleds. And between the two, the Doctor and his companions meet the two sides, and they come across, in the Kaleds, they come across a scientist, part of the scientist and military elite, a member of that team called Davros. And Davros goes around in a very familiar looking wheelchair or device, and he has produced these machines, these travel machines that will allow a mutant version of the Kaled race to survive and move on. But these machines are called Daleks. But does the Doctor take the opportunity to destroy the Daleks? And what else do we learn about their genesis? So, Julian, what are your first thoughts then about Genesis of the Daleks?
I have very mixed feelings about it, actually.
Okay.
It's good. Don't get me wrong. It's good. It holds up. It flows very speedily compared to most Doctor Who serials from the era. It's also a lot darker. I love the Daleks. But part of my problem is that I love the Daleks and I love the first Dalek serial, which it's very faithful to, except when it's not. And so, I don't know. I mean, Davros is stuck around. He's come back. He's cool. I like when he shows up, but there's a part of me that sort of feels like it's Borg Queen syndrome, like the Daleks. Do we need this guy? And and I'm puzzled by the finale.
Yeah, we'll get to the finale because there's a couple of bits in it I have questions about and how it works with the wider Dalek continuity. But I agree with what you're saying. Actually, I really enjoy this story. I think it's really well done. Like I say, it flows incredibly well. It is dark, and one of the things I was kind of fascinated by is we're quite used to, the Doctor being on the side of right for a start, and they're always being sort of like, or it's usually like a relatively clear cut. Here's the good guy, or here's the underclass. Here's the underdog that the Doctor will side with. In this, we quickly learn that both the Thals and the Kalids are equally as bad as each other. Davros sort of stands apart from all that, but the Thals are looking to produce a rocket, some sort of weapon to wipe out the Kalids, and the Kalids are looking for a device to wipe out the Thals. This is just down to mutual, self-destruction. There's no end in sight. This war's been on for 1,000 years. And I sort of found that quite interesting, that there's no sort of you look at especially the Kalids, it's clear the inspiration for their uniforms. There's no subtlety.
The Nazis specifically, yeah,
there's no subtlety. But the Thals are all wearing dungarees and stuff. So again, I'm like, okay, is this supposed to be Russia? It's clear, is that supposed to be sort of the influence? Sort of this, they've all got that high collar looking uniform and all this other stuff. So, but it's clear, there's no good guys here. And I find that kind of interesting, that the Doctor and the companions are sort of stuck in the middle. But you meet individuals on both sides that are good, or at least, not completely corrupted.
Yeah, and the Thals were the good guys of the first Dalek serial. So, I mean, they're going back to that, which I think is awesome. But, yeah, you're right that it's not a clear moral situation. But it's clear that the Thals aren't Nazis, and they actually talk about reconstructing the Kalid society, which seems, at least a step above Nazism. And,
no. You say that.
Go ahead.
You say that, but the way the way they treat Sarah Jane, and the Mutos. When they're sort of they've brought us back to this room. Why they left us here? When the rocket goes off and she's like, oh yeah, we're going to get incinerated by it.
Yeah, that's true.
I was like, all right, that's pretty dark.
Yeah, I mean, I think that to me, that sort of dark tone comes back to the war setting that's sort of established right away, which is clearly, very much World War I with trenches and gas attacks and stuff. And yeah, I mean, that's very dark. There's slow motion of people being shot. I mean, it's pretty dark for a show that is ostensibly a kid's show.
Yeah. Well, there's a couple of specific bits. In fact, it's worth talking about now. We're talking about the tone. Sarah, the group split up, which often happens because you can sort of run parallel stories then with different protagonists. With Sarah Jane, she sort of meets the Mutos, and which is like a mutant version of you're never entirely sure. They're just a mutant variant. Whether they are Kalid or Thal is sort of irrelevant. And they are used as slave labor by the Thals. But so Sarah Jane sort of instigates an escape at one point. And I love this bit. They're climbing up the scaffolding that surrounds this rocket, and it's done really well. I enjoyed it. Get to the top. There's a cliffhanger moment. You think she's fallen, and you find she's gone about 3 feet, which again felt very Batman 66, but that's besides the point.
Well, or even Batman 40.
Yeah. The bit I want to talk about is they get to the top. Her and this other Muto that sort of stays around, and then they get cut off. 2 Thal soldiers come up, and the Muto gives in and is like fine, and then Sarah Jane sort of is a bit more reluctant because she's scared of the drop. When that soldier steps over and says, "Give me your hand," and she does, thinking he's going to sort of step her across this gap, and then kicks her legs out from under her. So she falls off, and then he holds her, and he says, it's often said that people that fall from this kind of height are dead before they hit the ground. I don't think it's true. Shall we find out? And I'm just like you said, this is a kid's show. This was a family show. He pulls her up, granted, he doesn't let her go. But for a second, I was like, that's That's skirting a line. That really felt like skirting a line to me.
Well, and for all the stories about kids hiding behind the sofa to watch the Daleks on Doctor Who, I mean, you think that, would scare them worse. I mean, to me, the moment where Davros has agreed to this democratic forum to determine what's going on, and then you see it coming a mile away, but then you think, like, it's probably not going to be as graphic as it will be, but then Daleks storm in and execute everybody.
Yeah.
and you watch, like, all these good characters who are good guys, just get mowed down, and they're just all dead. And that seems to me like a very un-Doctor Who sort of moment. Although I like it. I mean, I like the
it's well, the thing, what I would say is, we say about the tone and stuff, and it is dark because this is the Daleks. This is the birth of the Daleks, like the literal genesis. It can't be lighthearted. Like, they are a product of violence and this other stuff, and then so this sets them up. Granted, this is a prequel, as it would be, because it's going back to their genesis, going back in time. But from the moment of their sentience, or even before that, really, like, I understand now, watching this, being like, yeah, these things are a threat. I understand why they're scary. We watched, obviously, the Peter Cushing version, and in that they felt a little bit like roving pepper pots, and they looked, they were fine, and we knew them as Daleks, but they always looked a little, felt a little bit silly. With this, they feel like a legit threat. They are grey and black, and they are very cutthroat, and when they gain sentience, like, it is merciless. They are scary in this.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that's one of the things that this does well. I mean, I'm a big fan of the Daleks. I think that those early serials, the second of which was adapted as that film, yeah, I mean, they're limited by the budgetary constraints at the time. And there are there are people inside these
little feet underneath. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. I mean, they're on rollers, and they have a plunger attached to them. I mean, there are elements that look silly, and they were based on the Nazis, which is why it makes sense for their origin to be a little more on the nose. But I think what was scary about them was the inhumanity. Yeah. It was that sort of Nazi allegory, writ sci-fi. These are people who are inhuman. They don't even look human, and they're glad to exterminate and murder people. Yeah. But you can tip them over, right? I mean, individually, they're not that scary. It's just that they are Nazi stormtroopers doing terrible things. Here, they clearly take great pains to make the Daleks themselves actually individually effective and scary. And I think that's done remarkably well. And I like the idea that when the Daleks appear, and it was always true, it's a big deal, right? It's like the Master shows up, it should be a big deal. The Daleks show up, it should be a big deal.
Yeah, and this feels, I mean, this whole story feels like a big deal. It feels more than, I mean, again, as you said, budget and design and stuff. But this is still like, what, 75. So we're not really talking like, cutting edge special effects or anything. But this story feels like they've put a bit more money into it. It's almost like they recognized it and were like, oh, this one, feels important. So the sets in and of themselves feel a little bit more robust. The costuming's really good. Like you said, the design of the Daleks, like, everything feels like a little bit more. And then you have Davros, and the makeup on Davros. It's no wonder they brought him back, because you design this character, and then you put him in, and then we'll get to the finale, and you go like, no, you got to bring this guy back. Like, the design is brilliant. Like, I absolutely love it. It's
Yeah.
What do you think?
It manages to look both cheap and really cool, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like, especially when you have and you and I are fans of sort of practical effects, and we don't mind a little, cheapness if we see what they're going for.
Yeah.
And especially around the eyes, you see like this is some sort of like it looks almost as if it's like a sort of transparent mesh that's been colored that the actor's looking through, and but it looks fuzzy, it looks out of focus, yet you still see this deformed face, and it just looks badass. It looks really cool, especially like he's got these sort of ligatures around his head, like he's strapped in and having his brain enhanced or something.
The design, the design is obviously like one of the things I always think of with Davros is like I don't know how old he is. Like everything that's happened to him is a sign of age. Like he has been around and been able to sustain himself. Like that thing that he goes around and looks at the base of a Dalek. He's only got the use of one arm. He's really sort of saying like he's decaying, or he's like say it's warped and everything. The chair itself is designed to hold him up. He's got metal straps coming over his shoulders and around his neck to hold his head up. Like he is trapped. And then you say that those ligatures and those things around his head. The thing I love is they all come into an eye. So he's blind, but then he has his blue eye in the middle of his head that he then using as like a sensory device. I'm like, this is brilliant. Like it's such a well thought out. Like I believe. Like I say, Davros has come back, and in New Who, I think even like a young Davros turned up at one point as a child. I think the 12th Doctor sort of met him. But I'm like, yeah, I can see why. Like when they did this TV show, they were like, oh no, he needs to come back. Like this is a iconic looking character. Like whoever designed him, well done, because it's a really brilliant design.
Well, he's also played within an inch of his life. I mean, he is such a tyrannical Nazi, fun, evil arch tyrant. And even when he seems to be totally at the mercy of others, he just sort of barks orders like this. Yeah, it's very arch. It's very wonderful to watch.
Yeah, I do like that when he's not listened to, he just shouts the order again, louder, as if like, which seems to be sort of like, I shall say it more angry and everyone shall obey. Yeah, like I don't know who's playing him, but like you say, it's wonderfully played. And every time he's in the scene as well, like again, the one thing, again, this goes back to technology and the way they've done it, because when you see like this like array of switches and buttons that he has on his sort of travel device, this bottom half of the Dalek, you look at that and they're like, we are seriously high tech, we are a future, we're a space race. I've got this series of 3 switches and all these buttons, and it doesn't matter what I do, they all do something different depending on the device the plot needs.
Yeah, I mean, my objection to that, I mean, I'm used to that with like, they've changed them with like the remastered original Star Trek, but you see the odometer, on the original Star Trek, where it's like, there are wheels with numbers inside there, that panel there. So, I mean, I'm used to that. It bothers me more that he keeps going back to some of the same switches, and I'm like, clearly that one was designed to move, and the other ones aren't.
Well, it's the things I kind of like is that even the Doctor seems to pick up on it, because at one point he's like, he figures out how his life support system works, which again I love that he is vulnerable, like he is this sort of kind of vulnerable character, but also like you say this terrible villain. However, there's another button I just want to quickly mention, which I literally made me laugh out loud when I saw it. Later on, when you say they get to the finale and they have this democratic vote that they're going to have about do they stop the Dalek program or not, and he says like, if you join, you can choose to join me and we will save our future race, or I will press this button that says total destruction, and it will totally destroy everything other than this bunker. And I love the fact, like you say, that someone's gone to the pains of writing a panel that says total destruction to go around this button. Like,
this is one of my pet peeves.
Yeah.
In sci-fi is that there's always like, well, if you want to blow up this unbelievably expensive space station with all of these redundancies and we've got a whole separate button built for that's got like, end cycle total destruction written on it or some bullshit.
Yeah.
Why do you have a dedicated button just for this? I'm looking at a laptop now, and I do see the blow up laptop button.
Yeah, self-destruct button. Oh, that's useful. Click.
Yeah,
it's the thing of I always sort of say you're right. It's in sci-fi. Like, at least one of the things we talk about sort of to correct. Like, at least with Star Wars, they always had they had to give commands, sort of like they had to give their number and all this other stuff. Like, I always preferred that, but then after all that, they still flip a switch.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do kind of love that when they're sort of like they have to go through all this hell, and it's usually really hard to get to the button. You've got to get through the fire pits and the rotating cogs and all this other stuff. What? Why have you? Firstly, why have you got a button? Secondly, why is it here? Well, we don't want everyone getting to it. You don't want anyone to get to it. Stop building it.
Yeah.
So yeah, that did make me chuckle when I see the button. And it's just randomly on a panel. It's not like it's hidden anywhere or under a glass case.
Yeah.
It's on the edge of a panel. Someone could put a glass on top of that and go, oh shit.
Right. Hope they don't trip.
Yeah, exactly.
Brace themselves against the total destruction button.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's a silly sci-fi trope. It is. I did want to say about Davros before we proceed. I mean, I love the design too, and I have mixed views about Davros. I'm happy when he shows up, but I also have that little bit of like, the whole point of the Daleks is that they don't have a commander. I'm kind of okay with it in their genesis, but then he shows up again and again, and it's like the Borg Queen for me.
Well, no, let's discuss that, because I think it does need addressing. Well, before we move on from Davros, I think he earns his place in this serial. You're right, because he is their creator. Like they have the Dalek, the creation serves a purpose. There is a notion that this planet or whatever it is, they're all being poisoned and they're all being mutated in some way anyway. So this thing will save the future of the race. It'll be some sort of like carry device so that people can travel around. So it's there to serve a purpose. So they need to be invented, and then that invention needs to be corrupted. And so Davros serves that corruption. And the finale, when he's sort of like, no, we shall remove pity and we shall remove this and remove this other stuff, like, when that turns on him and it's sort of like, hoisted by my own petard, damn it. Although it's a little bit obvious, it feels inevitable. Like, and I know, like you said, they bring him back because he's a cool looking character. That should be his end. Like,
yes, exactly.
They turned on their creator, they destroyed their creator, but they still went on to achieve his goals of intergalactic domination. And that should be it. So you're right. But I think he's well suited and well versed or well placed here. But I completely understand what you're saying about him popping up again later on, because it sort of twists his purpose.
Well, and I agree 100%. I'm fine with him here. I think it works here. I like his ending here. But, he's just so memorable that you've got to bring him back. And I don't mind another serial where you travel back to, pre the genesis of the Daleks. That's another prequel to the prequel. I'm fine with that. But let this be his end. He doesn't need to be commanding the Dalek fleet or some bullshit, Yeah. This is tied to the creation of that machine-like efficiency. And even though that's based on the Nazis having a Hitler figure, who ironically is a scientist, right? He's smart. Hitler was not smart. I'm totally with you. I think he works here. I like the ending here. He needs to be confined to that setting and let the Daleks be the Daleks and let Davros be Davros.
Yeah, no, I agree. I absolutely 100% agree. Like you say, when he turns up, you do get that, oh, that's kind of cool. But yeah, it doesn't always work. I do have it. There was a story later on which sort of like is the ending of this, and I can't remember which Doctor it was with. It may have been the 12th Doctor. Actually, it may actually be the story I'm thinking about. I have to go find it out. Where you find out it was all twisted. And he's actually been a prisoner of the Daleks and all this other stuff. And so I think they almost try and rectify this thing of him popping up again and again. So that I think that might be worth looking at. But yeah, but I do like him in this, and I think it works. This idea. One question though, and this is a sort of a side point. So this idea that they're all going to come, because you've got the mutos, as they call them, this sort of mutated race or this mutated sort of selection society. Everyone else seems pretty fine.
Mm-hmm.
So how quickly is this mutation supposed to happen that they're having to build these travel devices, the Dalek like casings?
Yeah, it doesn't make much sense.
No.
And in the original Dalek serial, it's more clear that this is a sort of like irradiated, messed up planet due to these wars, right? There's been a sort of nuclear exchange. They're traveling through toxic swamps. They still don't look mutated, except for the people who do. But I mean, yeah, I agree with you. And the other thing that's strange is like the very face hugger like aliens that are inside the Daleks. This, everybody just accepts that they're the future of their race. It's like, if you said to a human, like, look, climate change is happening. This is going to get a lot worse. A lot of animals are going to go extinct. Humans are not built for this. This weird, gross squid thing is what we're going to evolve into. So let's just put all our eggs in that basket. I think most humans would be like, I am not turning into a squid. We are not. That is not us.
What's interesting about that is, everyone seems to adhere, and everyone seems to agree with that analysis that this is our future, therefore we're having this path. But it all seems to be, like you say, this all-knowing Davros has sort of laid out this path. And there's hints, there's obvious moments early on when they talk about, Davros says that there's no life beyond this planet and Davros is never wrong. And then like the Doctor, he says, well, there's life beyond that galaxy and so on. And they obviously identify he has two hearts and everything, so on and so forth. And so it feels to me like maybe, it may not be what they're turning into.
Yeah,
like that whole
it
thing
is sort of ambiguous, right?
Yeah, like Davros has gone.
Has done this.
Yeah,
I mean, he could have just
made this shit up.
Thought this was the ideal organism, right?
Yeah,
and it clearly has. You would assume it has some of their DNA, but I mean, he is creating a new organism, and right. I mean, how quickly would one species turn into the other?
Yeah.
Especially given how different they are. Yeah, it's very bizarre. But I like that everybody's like, okay, Davros has created these squid things, and then he's going to further change them so that they don't have our concept of good and evil. Yeah. That's a bridge too far.
Well, that's one of the things. Again, it's this weird, and this is why I think this series is good, is because you have this sort of like, let's call it an ideology, a nationalism. Right, a race-based nationalism, which is the other thing that sort of like bothers me a little bit like this, because, and maybe it's a satire, I don't know, but they're like, we are one of these races has to survive, the Thals or the Khalids, and I'm going like, you're all from Kent, you're all British, and you're all from the southern counties. Like, I don't see any difference in accent or anything in this, but.
Yeah, that's an oddity of Doctor Who in general, right?
Yes. Yeah, yeah.
That the known universe is very white and has very British accents.
Yeah, yeah. We all speak the Queen's English on Scarrow. But one of the things that I do like is the fact that you have this sort of societal sort of nationalism. So we are the Thals, we're the Khalids, and we will do whatever we need to do to make this our race or our society survive. And that's what's driving these terrible acts, like the building of the bomb or the Daleks or whatever. So there's this war mentality that we have to survive, and so you get this. You never see the wider population of either thing. That's for obvious reasons, and that's fine. But when you get down below that, I like that some of the people aren't that black and white. So you get the characters. Not you get the villain, like say Davros is sort of like number 2 that's clearly there as just being sort of like the second panto villain, the Goebbels, if you will, of the whole situation. But you do meet these other characters that aren't as black and white. They're like, oh, we have to do this, we have to survive. That's what we've been fighting for 1,000 years. Not sure what over, but we have to survive. But below that, like the goody Khaled at one point, you're right, he talks about this mutation. He says, well, they need compassion, they need morality, and to understand our, attributes of right and wrong. And I'm going like, you want to wipe out an entire race, but on an individual level, you still have this idea of morality. And I found that really interesting. This differentiation between an individual and a sort of an ideology.
Yeah, that speech sort of bothers me. And for some of the reasons that you're mentioning, I mean, he talks about the importance of, like having your own judgment, capable of doing evil and capable of doing good. And I think you're right. What good have you done? And if this is the society that's been created, this is a great argument for a Clockwork Orange. I mean, we're not that far away. Changing what humans are capable of so they're not capable of, say, brutalizing their fellows would probably be a good change. Why is it that, it's like the objection isn't that compassion is necessary. The objection is, well, we just don't want to change because we're doing so well. We want this sloppy thing that's destroyed our planet. I mean, it seems this sort of like old-fashioned appeal to, well, golly gee, we got to have, the good to have the bad. And you're like, right, the oceans are overflowing. Florida's going to be underwater in a few years. Keep talking about that.
Well, that's what you just said there does bother me a little. The point you made that you've got to have the good, you've got to have the bad to have the good. Because the Doctor, and that's clearly what this serial is trying to explore. Because the Doctor has a similar thing, like he has the opportunity to use explosives to kill off the mutated Dalek spawn, whatever they are. And he's about to touch it, and he's like, "Well, do I have the right to wipe out a species?" And Sarah Jane's completely right. She's like, "Yes, you bloody do, because they will conflict all this pain, this death and destruction across the galaxy for the next millennia. You could stop all that right now." He's like, yeah, but out of that comes alliances and exploration and technology. And you're like, yeah. But so does billions of deaths. So does the destruction of planets. I'm pretty sure that, that's not a scale that you can balance.
Yeah, that whole argument bothers me too. So, I mean, I like that. I will say, I like that he has to debate committing genocide, because we've seen in the Macro Terror and we've seen in the recent Flux season, the Doctor perfectly willing to commit genocide.
Yeah.
Here, we're at the height of the old Doctor Who series, as far as most fans are concerned. And now we have a much more recognizably moral Doctor who is aware and that he is debating genocide. And kudos to the show for at least being aware of this now and making that a plot point. Having said that, that whole, we need to be good and bad sort of argument, if that's an argument against the evil of the Daleks, it's also an argument against a utopian enterprise, right? Yeah. Hey, we're just sloppy. We're going to kill and rape our neighbor, and we're also going to go to the moon. And you got to have both, buddy. No, not really.
Yeah.
And the same thing that you're pointing out, I agree with you 100%. It's like, right, Hitler united the rest of Europe, okay? That doesn't mean that it was a good thing. How many species has the Daleks wiped out and committed genocide against Why are you even debating this? Blow them up and go to therapy later.
Yeah. And you're right, because again, I agree. The fact that they are willing to sort of have this in the episode, although it's a little messy, is good. And it's one of the reasons I actually like this serial, because they are willing to sort of like have those debates. And the Doctor is actually shown to be a bit more thoughtful. Like this isn't just your action, I know Venusian Kung Fu Doctor. This isn't, or I'm going to play a flute and, like, say, wipe out a race of crab people. No, like, I'm going to actually consider the implications of this, because again, one of the things that the Doctor is obviously battling with, and this again comes with timey-wimey stuff, so it's all, let's not debate time travel again, but he is saying, like, well, if I do this though, like, the known course of history changes.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the other thing, is like, do I have the right to do that? This one act could fundamentally change the course of, of history for the galaxy, for the intergalactic planets. That's good, but it's, do I have the right in this moment to do that? And so I like the fact that you're right. He takes that time to consider it. However, the conclusion should be, yes, this is a good thing to do. But I'm interested in the question that he puts to Sarah Jane. And he says, and it's clear who he's alluding to, if you were offered the opportunity to kill a child, if you were told that child was going to grow to be ultimately evil and commit only evil acts, could you kill that child? I think Sarah Jane's like, yeah, I'll just bottle him in the face and get on with it. But, like, it's an interesting question. And again, it's clear that it's that debate about if you could go back and kill Hitler, could you? And again, so I actually approve that it's in there. It's an interesting question.
I like that debate. I mean, the answer is clearly yes. Kill Hitler, snuff that baby. I'm taking a pillow to his crib tomorrow if I can. Absolutely. And again, I'm not saying there isn't a moral remainder from that, but go to therapy later, right? It's like right now I'm dealing with a traffic accident. I've got to get these people to safety. Whether I cut them out of their car and, violated their bodily autonomy or something, that's a debate for another day.
Yeah.
But, so you're right. I like all of this. I mean, it's definitely showing a progression. I like that, the baby Hitler debate. On the other hand, you and I both agree with Sarah Jane. And the one line that I think is sort of over the top is as the Doctor's holding the wires and he says, this will make me just like them. And I hate this. I hate, it's like Batman says, well, if I kill the Joker, then he wins. I'm just like him. No, he's gone around and committed mass murders. You're not just like him, brother. If you go back in time and kill baby Hitler, that doesn't make you as bad as Hitler.
Yeah. One of the things, and again, I know I'm doing it again, so sorry.
Oh, rewriting.
Yeah, and I know it's easy, and I know it shouldn't happen. It's just what I do. So again, to anyone that listens is sick of me doing this. Sorry, it's a reflex. There's a muscle inside me that does it. The debate shouldn't be about destruction. It should be an option. But I think the reason the Doctor should stop isn't I don't have the right. It should be I have an opportunity at this early point to intercede. Like they are based on programming. They don't have to be a source of
conscienceless.
They don't have to be a source of untapped evil.
Right.
Davros is the problem. We have to stop Davros. We could actually change the course of history and turn these so that they actually go out and, give out intergalactic hugs. I don't know, but that should be the debate of, like, actually, there's no need to kill right now.
Mm-hmm.
I think we can change their future. Ultimately, he needs to fail, but that should be the mission that he's on. Instead of killing, that's the Doctor to me. That's what the Doctor, and I think that's realised in a few later Doctors. But
that's a very good point. And I think if you look at the structure of the episodes, the Doctor is set up from this mysterious Time Lord, in the beginning, he's given this mission of stopping the Daleks, right? By basically any means necessary. That then becomes psychologically, mentally, for the narrative, for the screenwriters, the mission of the Doctor that then succeeds or fails. What's interesting is in this, by the time you're in the 6th episode, the rest of the Kalids are focused on exactly what you're saying, right? We accept that this is the future of our race, our species, but you have altered it in a way that makes it a force for evil, and we don't accept that. The Doctor never really gets there. No. And you're right that if he did get there earlier on, he could say, Davros, you have done an amazing thing. You've created a new species. They are tremendously effective. On the other hand, you have artificially changed that species in a way that will cause all of this destruction.
Yes.
And, let the mutant squids be the mutant squids.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's where there is a debate to have in that sort of like what could obviously Davros is evil. There's no doubt about it. Like it's this thing about survival. He talks about them. He even talks about like the master race and blah blah. And but there should be this thing about what is your legacy. Your legacy is one of death, and at the moment your legacy will be one of death and destruction and so on and so forth. It could be one of unity and all this other stuff. So yeah, it's an interesting one that, like you say, the people of Khalid seem to get there before the Doctor does.
Yeah, but I think you make a very good point, which is that should be the Doctor's motivation. He should see that kind of out, and he doesn't, but other characters do, and I think that's maybe a process of writing it. What do you make, having said that about Davros and his motivation? There is that very telling sequence in which he's asked if you could release a disease that would destroy all life in the universe, and he sort of, I would have that power. With a flick of my finger, I could cause such a. There is this sort of like idea that he's really ultimately a narcissist.
Yeah. Oh, I agree with that. I mean, he says at it like he would accept his own death in order for this microscopic being to be the ultimate, or to be the only existing organism in the universe. Living supreme in the universe. I would have created that and to have had that power. It's really interesting because it's sort of like well, you'd be dead. Everybody else would be dead. No one would remember you or would be there to celebrate this thing. So it seems a bit pointless. But it's about power, isn't it? It's about ultimate power. This idea of, you often hear in films about this idea of having life and death over an individual. Like, I've got the power of life and death over you or whatever. But this is like the Doctor's saying, pronouncing this thing, going, this would wipe out everything. And so he has ultimate life and power of life and death over the universe, and it tantalizes him. It gives him almost like a sexual thrill. He's like, oh, yeah, yes, great. And so I did find that really interesting because that does set him up as like he's irredeemable. There is no point. There is no point of like negotiating with Davros. He's not there to debate his legacy. He is only there to be like, no, I want to destroy everything, and that's it. That's my objective. That's it. Like he's not there to be to debate or discuss it.
And it seems like he does get his wish in a way. Maybe not all life in the universe, but I mean, but then I wonder, why is he then? He clearly is so narcissistic. He wants to survive at the end. I mean, he does not want the Daleks to kill him. He gets his comeuppance. I mean, I'm happy with it. You're happy with it too. But he still has that urge to survive. He doesn't have a moment where he says, I have accomplished a great thing, and galaxies will burn because of what I have created.
Yeah, it's almost like really short-sighted, isn't it? Ultimately, because he won't be. Although I don't know, he believes he will be there to see it. Like, I wondered if, because at one point I wondered if his deformity was caused by these mutations. If he was sort of like an advanced form of this mutation, and that's what's driven him down this path, maybe then I'd be more like he sees himself akin to the Daleks, and they'd be like, no, you are inferior to us, which is ultimately what it is. But it'd be nice if
it makes it. I was going to make this point earlier about Davros, right? That there is a social argument to be run. I mean, if you make points about rewriting the story, which I think are quite good points, I make these sort of social points. There is always a problem with the handicapped character is the character of unbelievably evil, and as if like his deformity or his scars or his age or whatever has made him willing to accept human deaths in a way that doesn't make sense. And I do think that it's tied to, I mean, what you say, I don't know if it's literally true that he has done these experiments on himself, but it does seem that his physical appearance being seen as ugly or handicapped does seem tied to his acceptance of these squid beings, these weird things as the future.
Yeah, it seems tied to it. And this is one of the things, although this is called the Genesis of the Daleks, like it leaves quite a bit still ambiguous. Like we know what Davros's objective is, but we're never entirely sure what his motivator is. Just that he wants to do it at any cost. Like he will literally like manipulate and destroy his own people in order to get his own ends. But yeah, Davros still remains a little bit of a mystery in this story because it's quite interesting because what they're trying to do is they're going to tell you the story of like this is how the Daleks came into being. We don't need you don't need to know about Victor Frankenstein. You want to know about Frankenstein's monster. And we're going like but in a modern, if this was again was a New Who or modern storytelling, you'd be like no, we want to know about the creator, and then how his motivations have drove him to do this creation. And there's less about that with Davros. It's just like he's evil and he is deformed, therefore he is ultimately the baddie.
Yeah, and you do see, we've seen Doctor Who evolve a lot from the beginning to now, but there is still this sense of like yes, this is very dark for a children's program, but on the other hand, the primary goal, at least at this point, once they drop those Marco Polo educational, the Aztecs, stuff, the point is to entertain. Yes. And it is perfectly fine, especially if that's your goal, to say, hey, we're going to show you the scientist who created the Daleks, and he's going to be a baddie bad Hitler type, but he's going to be so much fun to watch. And I think that's fine, and they succeed on that level. Oh, yes. But you're right, there are other deeper ways of taking it that are closed off. Yeah, and like you say, again, you're right though that that's not the intent of this show. It's a show to this is a serial. Like it has to end on each episode has to end on a cliffhanger. It's designed to be action. This is now more close to being action adventure. We have a more thoughtful Doctor, but he's still sort of like man of action kind of thing. It's still that adventure TV show, and so that's the point. And this is more like you say, as we've said before, this does it brilliantly. This is to introduce the Daleks as a menace, as a real threat, and that's the objective, and it does it very, very well. However, like you say, it would have been nice to sort of in a conversation get more about Davros, of where he came from, which I think would have been more interesting. Well, and in part, perhaps it's that lack that makes people want to bring him back. Not just that he's memorable, but that I think this is fascinating when you think about fiction and you think about the way in which fictions fail. We often want to bring back like Doctor Doom because he's so two-dimensional, and it's like, yeah, I'm going to write him, but really give him a motivation. And yet, if you see, I don't know, nobody watches Citizen Kane and is like, I want to bring Citizen Kane back. If it was only Charles Foster Kane, what would he do in the 90s? He could have been frozen cryogenically like Walt Disney was supposed to be. Well, no, we know who he is. That movie's closed. There is this weird way in which the unsatisfying nature of something that's also really satisfying in other ways makes us want to either, ultimately rewrite it. But the way we rewrite it is by bringing him back and starting to answer these questions. And then we resent that he's
it's this, yeah. This becomes that difference, doesn't it, between head canon and canon. And I literally listened to a podcast recently, Imaginary Worlds, if anyone, I'd recommend it, fantastic podcast, that had this debate. That was, you have these scenarios where there's a character that may fall out of a plot or has a demise or whatever. But Boba Fett is a good example from the Star Wars universe of like, he's in it for whatever purpose. He dies like a bit of a chump, but for some reason everyone was like, he's really cool and mysterious and we want to know more. So there was, people had this headcanon or whatever, what they thought of him. And then they were like, but now we have, before we have the Boba Fett show, but that's like the ultimate version of it. But they had all the novels and the extended universe, and it drove these ideas out. And that's what happens, because in the same with Doctor Who, they bring him back because they want to explore. The same with the Master. Like the Master's another example where like, this is the version we've got. They're childhood friends. Well, what does that mean? How does that relationship work between the Master and the Doctor? So they keep trying to explore it in different ways. And I kind of like it at times. And then there's other times when it's a bit like, it's overkill.
Yeah. No, I agree. And I just find it fascinating that flaws sort of spur our imagination in ways that not perfection, but something that is answered satisfactorily doesn't.
Do you think this comes? There's a point here that I'm interested in, because it's always villains more so than heroes or goodies. We always want to bring villains back. Now, ultimately, unfortunately, it seems to, and there's a few that this can never happen for. If you go back far enough, you end up having to have the sympathetic villain origin story, the Killing Joke, Victor Fries and his wife, from the Batman animated series or whatever. Like, you can always go back and find that there's that sympathetic villain, origin story. And people think it's sort of like, oh well, we're giving them, 2 dimensions, we're giving them whatever. And unfortunately, it sometimes, like I say, it just doesn't need to happen. Like, I just want Hannibal Lecter. I don't need to know that Hannibal Lecter was driven to cannibalism because of whatever. Like, no, he's just a brilliant man has this psychosis. That's it. It's just sometimes with villains, the more you give them, the less they are. And I fear that would be the same with Davros. Like, you go back far enough, you're just like, oh, right, okay, well, that's why. But
I think the problem is that we feel like nobody sees themselves as a villain, right? And so if we are going to dramatize more about that villain and show where they came from, we don't want somebody to just say, you know what, I'm going to be the biggest asshole I can. Yeah. Probably nobody has said that. And so...
Well, I don't know.
Okay. I mean, I did a few contacts, but yeah, I mean, I do think that there is this desire to humanize, and that's probably a good thing socially, but this might be, again, sort of a situation where what we like in fiction goes against our own, politics and what we want to be socially out there. But it's fun watching just a baddie bat, it's fun watching, somebody twirl their mustache and, say, Mr. Bond, I expect you to die. Yeah,
exactly. Like, I like them that they're driven by greed or some base instinct, like, so yeah, I don't know. I like you say, Davros being this I wouldn't say mustache twirling, but this deformed sort of like villain, pantomime villain almost. Like I enjoy him because he is that. And there are questions, but like I don't want all of them answered because I like to have my own headcanon of like, oh, this is what, and it works for that. But yeah, you're right. That whole species, the whole speech he gives about the disease is actually really good. You know, I actually really enjoyed that because that's proper like arch villain kind of territory. That is. And I'm sure whoever I'll say, you know, apologies not for naming the actor. I'm sure there's people that are shouting at us for it, but he does a great job in that moment. Like, and he clearly is reveling in it as well. But yeah,
amen. And speaking of disease, that's also brought up by Sarah Jane, where you know she says, "Well, if this were a disease, if this were a virus that you're exterminating," and I thought, "Oh, they're working against their point." I mean, you and I still think it's the right thing to do to kill the Daleks in the crib, but I mean, given that if that's your choice, right, you can't reprogram them. But the comparison of living beings to a virus goes back to obviously macro terror and Hitler both.
Yeah.
So that should be a giant red klaxon going off for the viewer.
Yeah, it's an interesting one that, like you say, they've worked hard in this, I think, to try and sort of create a theme and stuff, but it still sort of stumbles over itself at times. But I think one of the things that comes out of this is that this is quite a complex argument. You know, like you say, it's in theory, it's always going to be, you know, yes, I would of course do this, but in practice, it's that thing of again, like, well, can I? Should I? Can I change things a different way? What's nature? What's nurture? Those sorts of things. Yeah, I don't know. The Daleks need, you know, the Daleks aren't redeemable. You don't want the redeemed Daleks, do you? That's not the point. But I like the fact that, again, like I said, that they try to have that debate, and they get as an audience member, they're sort of saying to you, you know, do you have the, you know what they're getting at? Like it's not subtle. The World War II parallels are obvious throughout. But yes, but one of the things I want us to get to, because we've talked about sort of the Doctor in this debate, but you also mentioned this is sort of considered by many to be the height of the sort of the Doctor. What are your thoughts then on Tom Baker as the Doctor?
Well, that's an interesting question. I think he's kind of overrated. You know, he shows up on everybody's list as, you know, the best of the classic years, and there are, you know, you might disagree. You know, usually when people disagree, it's who they encounter first. To me, I always struggle with the sillier aspects. And most Tom Baker serials, he still is, you know, a prime mover, but he's not so much a man of action. There is a shot in this where he's being escorted around, and you really see that scarf dragging on the floor. And I think, you're going to trip over that, buddy. This is ridiculous. And it is funny when he has to empty out his pockets and more stuff keeps coming out. That's a sort of classic Tom Baker moment. And I like this stuff, but I think that Doctor Who always has there's a thin line between Doctor Who as a competent alien who, you know, should be, if not serious, at least very capable, and Doctor Who as a sort of comic relief character or a silly alien who just is a little flippant compared to how a human would be in that position, for whether that's due to having become mature enough to be silly or just a difference in physiology or personality. I think there's always a fine line between the two. And there are scenes and there are doctors that sort of go over that line too much for me. And I think that I don't object to a doctor being too serious, but I do sort of, you know, I mean, he doesn't use the jelly belly in this. I can't stand the jelly belly. You know, every time he pulls out a jelly belly, I'm like, okay, I get it. You're quirky.
Oh no, yeah, Jelly Baby. They're called Jelly Baby.
Yeah. Sorry.
No, yeah.
That's a British thing.
It is, yeah. They're a bit another thing. They're a little bit Marmite. Some people love them, some people hate them. That's a quirk too far. I agree. That's sort of like, I always find things like that like a forced catchphrase. You know, some things catch on and become a catchphrase. Other things are sort of like constantly like, oh, they're still doing that thing as if like it's gonna, you know, really catch on. Yeah, he's interesting, Tom Baker, because he has that sort of like manic look. You know, the big toothy grin, the big eyes, and sort of the big hair, and he looks. He's a tall guy as well. Like this guy's well over 6 foot. He's quite, you know, I won't say intimidating, but like he obviously, you know, he's got a screen presence because he's obviously so big and he's got a lot of energy. But he never carries. One of the things is sort of like to compare him to some of the other doctors, and we'll get to some of the later ones as well. Like, I feel that Tom Baker's a turning point. Is the first thing to eccentricity over sort of certain things. Like, you know, eccentricity becomes a character trait. To, you know, well, this one does cricket and wears celery. You know, that sort of thing.
Yes.
And so the scarf, the jelly babies, and other things. One of the things I find interesting that sort of is sort of developing with the Doctor, and is a big part of New Who, is this sort of like the manic comic relief, but then the darker undertones. And you sort of get that a little bit. I mean, like, again, you said about like sort of like who you first come across. Like I first came across Sylvester McCoy. That was my first Doctor. And so that idea of having a slightly darker side was a part of what I expected. And it's sort of, having watched other Tom Baker, I've probably watched more Tom Baker than the previous Doctors we've talked about. And so it's hinted at every now and then as that sort of temper will come out. And then but in this episode in particular, like in this story, you think, oh, that's something they're going to touch on. This is one where that frustration or those instances where he's seen the Daleks kill these people is going to come out. Like this confrontation with Davros should be fiery. And it never sort of feels like that. And I feel that's a bit of a disappointment. It always, flippant is actually a very good word to describe how he sort of comes across in some of this. And he gives in relatively easily. Like his companion's been hurt and he's like, all right, I'll tell you everything the Daleks have ever done, and so you can record it. And I think like there'd be later Doctors that would be like, you've been my companion and, you know, I have feelings for you, but I can't, I've got to sacrifice you for the greater good.
Or at least have a debate. I mean, at least sort of struggle with it more. Is really the companion there who says, you know, don't do it, Doctor.
Yeah, and the Doctor's like, no. I shall tell them everything and they shall record it.
Yeah, it's funny because when you watch documentaries about Doctor Who, they always talk about sort of this slow evolution of silliness, of that eccentricity. And they go back to the second Doctor as sort of injecting that levity. And every time you get to a sort of more silly Doctor, or a Doctor who had some eccentricity, the discussion is like, oh, well, he's the one who invented it, right? And injected and so it's very hard to trace, like, you know, where these specific traits come from. I mean, you know, probably Baker, you know, Tom Baker was my first Doctor in the sense that he was the one whose reruns were running on the PBS when I first watched Doctor Who as a kid. So I remember Tom Baker, but he's grown on me. And I think he's better in this episode. You're right. He doesn't get fiery. He doesn't get angry enough. There's always that problem that I feel with Doctor Who of like, I don't believe this guy's an alien. He's clearly just an eccentric Brit, you know? You know, and part of that is maybe bias. I mean, I'm sure that, you know, if you're Greek and you're looking at an American broadcast and you're like, that's just a rich American white dude, you know? I don't believe he's from planet K86-9. But so some of that might be that, but I do think that he works better in this serial, and I like him better in this in part because it's so dark and he's contemplating genocide and he sort of has to pull back from that. And I think Baker can do that. That manic energy comes out, where I think a lot of his other serials, he's kind of just wandering from one thing to the next, and never seems to appear threatening at all. It just seems to be like, yeah, well, we should do that and hope you don't die.
Yeah, I mean, it's a bit. An example of that is, and again, this is an interesting pacing choice. The scene we talked about very early on about Sarah Jane being pushed off the top of that rocket and they grab her arm, which is traumatizing, really. I mean, to me, I was like, bloody hell, they go in there. That's pushing it. It's then very quickly followed by the Doctor and Harry walking through some underground cave, and Harry's bitten by a large oyster-looking thing, and then the Doctor has to hit it with a rock. And I'm just like, this looks crap. You've just had a really sort of intense moment, where Sarah Jane has sort of almost been dropped off a scaffolding like 100 feet up. And now your other companion's being chewed on by what is tantamount to a Muppet. And it doesn't look great. And then, like you say, the Doctor hits him with the rock and then gets the stalactite and starts sort of trying to open it. And it's that thing again where it's sort of like, it's like there's darkness and there's action and stuff going on, and it although it's good in a lot of it, there's other moments when I'm like, yeah, this doesn't feel in tone with the rest of this show. And so it's which I think obviously is it's still got to show monsters, it's still got to show these alien things, and that's sort of the point. But like, yeah, those clamshell things are not good.
Yeah, I'm with you, and I think that I sort of like Dark Doctor Who. I mean, to me, when I think of, it's not that there aren't comedic episodes that I enjoy, and comedic bits, right? I mean, nothing is ever pure tragedy or comedy, but I like Doctor Who as an adult show. I like Star Trek as an adult show. I'm not saying, these shows have to depict faces melting and, all kinds of adult traumas, but I do like when people die. I do like when, if you're facing, the Daleks, it's not going to be pretty. And just having the screen flash white and seeing somebody fall from a distance doesn't quite do it for me. That's somebody's, mother, son, or daughter.
Yeah.
So I do like the dark Doctor Who, but it does seem at this point that, like, this is such a dark serial, and yet it does have those elements, like you say, of the oyster. I always come back to, I like this much more this time through. Having seen it before, the thing that has stuck with me so much more than any other aspect of the plot is Sarah Jane falling in that terrible cliffhanger in that missile silo where, like, yeah, it's a good set, but like, there's too much with the missiles back and forth. It's like, get back to Davros, get back to, this dark stuff that's working. And in fact, this time through that whole oyster scene, I thought, I'm missing something. This is connected to, those mutants that power the Daleks. No, it's just a random thing.
Well, they keep guessing. Oh, these could be some of Davros's pets. You go, or it could just be an inhabitant of Skaro. Like, I don't know. Like, it's irrelevant. It's a device. What I would say is, though, to differentiate, and you say about tone and stuff, the whole thing with Sarah Jane, and I will sort of just circle around on this because it bothered me. Her whole escape, you're right, it goes on a little bit long, and they obviously use it as the cliffhanger. And the cliffhanger, whenever the companion or the Doctor is in a scenario, it's the Batman 66 thing again, isn't it? Like, whenever the Doctor or the companion is in a scenario where they're there, oh my God, they've fallen off something, or oh my God, they're being electrocuted, or whatever, I know it's going to be resolved within the first 30 seconds of the next episode, and they're not really in threat, not really in danger. So, but it looks okay. However, she sees the thing I would say is, she witnesses people being shot at. Like, she is being shot at as she's climbing that scaffolding. And there are people that she makes friends with a Khaled like soldier who's also being used as slave labor. And he's just killed offhand. Like, he helps her. He stops her from falling at one point, and then he's shot and falls. And you see him hit the floor. And then like they climb up, and there's the whole bit with the two soldiers. And all I can think of is Harry's, when they get back to the TARDIS, Harry's going to be like, I almost had my leg bitten off by a giant clamshell. That's crazy. And she's like, yeah, I have a phobia of heights. I'm now suffering from PTSD. So if anyone ever we've talked about this before, like something goes off in the TARDIS, she thinks she's being shot at. She's hitting the floor. Like, she is like, I would like, and I kind of like Elizabeth Sladen in this role. Like, she plays it sort of like she's kind of cute and sort of innocent and young, but she gets put through some stuff in this episode where I'm like, yeah, she needs some time off from the TARDIS after this. Like, she's going to get her shit together. Like, she's not going to be doing well after this.
Yeah, don't forget she's been tortured. She's had to think about the extermination of a vast portion of the galaxy, and advocate for genocide. I mean, there's going to be some PTSD.
Yeah, at one point she thinks that her death is going to come at the hands of a giant rocket that's going to incinerate her. Like, like, she does not come out of this like, psychologically unscarred.
Yeah, and it would be fun to sort of have the sort of Next Generation family episode after this. I mean, of course you couldn't in those days when everything was so serialized, but I mean, that is another thing that I sort of object to about this. I love this serious Doctor Who, and I always feel like Doctor Who is a show. All right, well, Star Trek I love. Okay, some Star Trek is totally daft, and some Star Trek is so good, right? And you just kind of accept the good stuff with the bad. Doctor Who is a different sort of beast, and Doctor Who is sort of like always good enough and fascinating enough. And this is not as true. There are some solidly amazing episodes of the Revive show, but Doctor Who is often good enough that I want it to be rewritten and done better, right? Like a more adult, better budgeted, extra couple drafts of that script. This would be amazing, and I'd be like the biggest. But it's like, it's just good enough that I'm a big fan, but I always want it to be something a little different. And part of what I want it to be is a little more adult, a little more of the tone of this serial versus others.
Yeah, no, I agree. I completely get that. Like, there's flashes of it when you're just like, even with the Doctor. And I see it in this. There are, you said, the debates and the discussions, and there's things going on where you go, they're really pushing the boundaries of this, and I'm pretty sure, I get a feeling that they've done stuff, and actually on the DVD, and I haven't watched it, there's a making of, and so I'm quite intrigued about a couple of things where I'm like you said, there's that shot at the end when all the Khaleds have been killed and they're just lying across the floor and stuff, and I'm like, I'm pretty sure someone at the BBC must have had something to say about this. Like, this is going out at like 7:00 on a Sunday evening or whatever. Like, someone must have said, can we not focus on the dead bodies as much? Can we pull back? I don't know. Like, it feels like they've pushed the boundaries a lot on this one, and that's cool. And I like the fact they've done that. However, I would say, talking about Sarah Jane, because she gets put through some stuff in other episodes as well that I've watched. There's an episode in New Who with David Tennant called Reunion, where they bring her back, and she went on to have a spin-off show. Where I think she's a teacher or whatever, and there's a bunch of kids in it and all this other stuff. Sarah Jane Adventures, right? It's called the Sarah Jane Adventures. And again, I watched some of that. It's very kid focused. It's quite good in other bits and pieces. Anyway, the fact that she's sort of like, yes, let those adventures continue. We should be doing this and that. And I for her, like, I want the hard hitting one where it turns out like there's that reunion episode where like the Doctor finds her, and she's like an alcoholic. She's had like a litany of failed relationships behind her. She has nightmares continually. And she's like, oh no, Doctor, and she's going to Rose, like, no, leave now, because he will leave you a broken shell.
Well, I love this, and this is something that the New Who, part of the genius of Davies, who all praise his virtues in Doctor Who to no end. Part of the genius of Davies was focusing on exactly this dimension with a companion, who really were disposable characters.
Yeah.
Even Sarah Jane, who had her own fans at conventions and stuff like that. I mean, she just leaves. And nobody talks to her again. I mean, there's that K9 spin-off show. I've seen it. But
for you.
No, I mean, it's not the worst episode of Doctor Who I've ever seen.
Yeah.
But I mean, I do love K9, even though it's a bit crazy. But you know, I mean, it's cool. It's better than watching. What am I going to do with my time? Watch the A-Team? But you know, I mean, the companions were always disposable, and you do see, especially in the early Davies stuff, this sense of the toll that it takes. And I always, and then they sort of revert back to form. But I always love this idea of what you're talking about. Like, I know about alien civilizations. I can't go back to normal life, and especially given, even if somebody doesn't have, male or female, doesn't have a flirtation with the Doctor or sexual fantasies about the Doctor, how the hell are you going to find somebody if you want to be with somebody who you look up to when, you know, you've been cavorting around the universe with the Doctor, right? After you've been to you know, Mars in the year 6000, how are you going to go back to the farm?
Yeah, no, exactly. I think that's the, you know, it's not, it's what is, it's thing is, it's not just what you've seen and done. It's that height, you know, every week we're going on an adventure where you're under threat. Your life is under threat. And, you know, I don't want to be flippant about this, but like, we've had soldiers that do a tour of you know, Iraq or you know, Afghanistan or wherever, and they're there for like, what, you know, a year. I don't know. I don't know, and I wouldn't want to talk to it in detail. But like, you know, they come back and they're like, oh yeah, that constant fear of the base being attacked. You know, that constant heightened tension has an impact, like you say. So when you come back, that adrenaline always being up, or like having to live in a certain way with a certain mentality, almost carefree or sort of like laissez-faire towards this idea of death, in order just to get by daily, and then switching that off. Like, you must have something like that staying in the TARDIS for a period of time. You're like, yeah, everywhere we go, I'm almost killed. I have seen the Earth destroyed numerous times. I have seen what's inside a Dalek. I've seen what's inside a Cyberman. I've seen what can happen. I've seen what happens to us as the human race. You know, I have almost died, and then all of a sudden you're like, bye, back to Earth. And you must be like, yeah, popping down to Sainsbury's to pick up some groceries all of a sudden doesn't appeal. Where, I think there's a, you know, you could have it where, you know, which one was it? Martha. She was only around for a season, but like, she was like a doctor. You know, she was obviously trained to be a doctor, and when she left, like, she went and joined one of the others, and she was like, oh yeah, we now work for UNIT. Like, you led us on this path. Like, I had to keep going. Like, you know, and I was like, that makes sense. You know,
and I love Martha's arc. You know, she's one of my favorite companions of the New Who. But I like everything that you're saying, and I like, especially the, you know, this gets back to wanting it to be a sort of darker, slightly more realistic show, right? But a more psychologically realistic show.
Yeah.
And so much of the problems of, you know, these shows come back to the serialized format where, you know, I mean, I mentioned the family episode of Next Gen. They had to fight to get that on the air because having that kind of connection was seen as a negative. What the hell are people going to think when that's the first episode they tune into, right?
Yeah.
We need to explain this to them. Of course, now that's disappeared with serialized television, with the rise of premium TV. But, you know, I think so much of what fails in Genesis of the Daleks is because of that serialized thing. that it doesn't have that recovery episode. And the other thing is, this wasn't intended to be a revitalization of the Daleks. This was intended to be, for all intents and purposes, the last Dalek serial for a while. And it's just like, well, if we're going to do the Daleks yet again, we better do something special with them. So let's do the genesis of the Daleks. And they had Terry Nation, who invented the Daleks and did the first serial, back to write it. So that's great, but you don't, like, why does this Time Lord show up in the beginning? You don't see him at the end.
Yeah.
The ending is just them spinning around and, like,
I hate that.
cheapest. Yeah, I mean, it's really horrible. And they're just going to be on to the next adventure, and it's not going to be hold on a minute. Our choices led to the extermination of vast portions of multiple galaxies, if you believe this is like the 6th or the 7th galaxy or whatever nonsense the Doctor says. So what do you make of? I mean, my theory is it's the serialization that sort of hampers a lot of this.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that's the thing. It's the two things that really stand out to me is, first, like you say, that serialization, that intent of, like, was it Stanley used to say about, every issue will be somebody's first. Like, you've got to give them an intro point, so you can't be too in depth. The other thing, though, is this was never intended to come back. This was supposed to be on, like you say, on a Sunday evening, Saturday evening, whenever. We're supposed to play, and then was done. And so I think that's the other thing, is like they're not thinking about that. Again, it's like, let's do the Genesis of the Daleks. It'll be cool. It'll get people in, and then it give us a good story, because obviously they did all the novelizations, because that was how you revisited these. So they'd be like, okay, well, then we can give Terry Nation the opportunity to write this as a novel, and we can book it out, and everyone will like it, and so on and so forth. Like that's probably as far as they got, I think. So you're right. They're hampered by that idea of being the serializers. Let's move on, which has been around for decades, even before this. But I also think there's this notion of, like, this was never meant to be seen again. Really. So it was never a consideration of, like, no one's going to come back in sort of like the next season and be like no one was supposed to come back and give it this level of analysis where you're like, well, Sarah Jane could seriously be suffering from a phobia of heights at this point.
Right.
So I think that's the other thing, is it was never supposed to be, it's not to call it like fluff or candy floss, but it was supposed to be one and done entertainment. Disposable, yeah.
Yeah, we're talking about, comics were the same way, so much of popular culture was intended to be disposable. Not only did the Beatles suck, until they got
controversial.
Serious. Oh, no, come on. The Beatles are the most overrated band in history. But they were not, when they were doing covers and shit, when they started coming over here, they were, nobody thought those songs would even have records of them in 50 years, let alone that they'd have a catalog worth billions. That was considered disposable, and that was a really big hit.
Well, that's the idea of these. A lot of these things, like the masters, were often sort of destroyed, weren't they, for both music and television, because they were just like, no one's going to want to see this again. Put it in the bin. We've got to save space, and especially serialized sci-fi. So yeah, I think that's the thing. They were just like, and a lot like comics in particular. You need to have, what do we call it? The second act. You kick off with the first act. You have that first sort of interaction with the new Doctor. You meet the new companion, or you meet the companion. That's your first act, and then you're going to run the second act for as long as possible. And you don't want to disrupt that, because it's going to be story after story after story after story, and you're never going to, and then the third act isn't really a third act. It's just passing into a new first act for a new setup, and that's it. And so, yeah, you're right. So that's the notion of it. There's never going to be a finale where you're going to have that sort of reflection and go, like, there's a little bit more of it again in New Who. Like you said, they've addressed some of this. And again, I think of like you said, Rose Tyler gets a resolution rather than being dropped. That's actually sort of like heartfelt and feels a part of her journey. Martha had an arc. What's her face? The brunette that was with the 12th Doctor and stuff. No, not so much Donna.
Donna
Donna Noble. Well, they all did. Donna Noble gets sort of a resolution. Yeah, they've always tried to address like a finale, haven't they, for the companions?
But even the whole Davies era got a finale, and it goes on, right? But I mean, there is clearly the end, a book ending there, right? I mean, and not just a book, maybe a series of 4 books that's ending there, or 5. And you feel that sense of this is a real ending. Somebody's going to do a successor series, but I mean, this has an arc that's gone from a traumatized, from a traumatized doctor to somebody who loves humanity and is a lot more open and has found that silliness in his heart again.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I think that they've been able to do that, but we're not going to see that with Classic Who. Like, that was not the intent. Having said that, I don't know. There was some. By the time they get to the 7th Doctor, and we'll talk about Ace when we get there.
Yeah, I remember Ace.
She's an interesting character. And she is given beyond the 7th season. Sorry, beyond the 7th Doctor, in books and some audio things. Like, she is given an arc and a completion, and I believe she even goes and travels to Gallifrey and stuff. So, so it's interesting how the companions seem to become more than disposable later on, and they're given more of an arc. So we will get to that point.
What's interesting is that we've talked about this disposability, and that's been so much a part of talking about, especially TV from this era and earlier, but even film. Just popular culture in general was not meant to be preserved the way we think of it today. And yet, it's fascinating that when the Doctor is narrating to Davros the mistakes of the Daleks, he's going through all the Dalek serials. Now he's skipping around, he's skipping forward, but clearly this whole serial is a very close prequel to the first Dalek serial. He then references the second Dalek serial. He gets the year wrong, but he references the second.
Yeah, he says the year 2000, doesn't he?
Yeah, it's 2100 instead of 2150. Yeah. It's wildly off, but then he references, and there are, even in like the was it Morbius episode where you see this flashback, there is this weird way in which the Doctor was certainly by this point, that's also a Tom Baker episode. There is this kind of continuity that's really being paid attention to in a way that you would not expect for a medium that is still essentially disposable. I mean, I guess it is selling reruns around the world at this point.
Yeah, well, don't forget, by this point as well, you've already had the 3 Doctors. So they've done the thing of bringing the 3 Doctors together, and you're going to get the 5 Doctors at a later point. So, yeah, it seems to be building on this idea of continuity in the loosest possible way. There is this thing of like, all this happened if we say it happened. Otherwise, it may not have happened. It's all very... the continuity is always quite loose. It's been tight, obviously, in New Who. That's the whole point, and they've tried to do sort of lore around it. But even then,
you say tight. Right,
it's tight. It's slightly tighter than Classic. Yeah, it got a little loose at times, but it's interesting. Like, this idea that sort of like they can play with it, but it seems that they're playing with it rather than. I mean, that's almost like an Easter egg, isn't it? That's the kind of thing that if we were to watch a film now, you'd be like, oh man, that here's all the Easter eggs you missed or you may have missed. There'd be an article about it on sort of Screen Rant or something. And so I like those kind of things.
But that's a good point. And of course, people would be like, I'm a real Doctor Who fan. Like, I caught all those references. But I do think that while this sort of serialization limits this serial, it limits what you could do in this era. We both want some of that PTSD exploration, the family episode. But at the same time, I do like this idea. I do like serialized television, and I do like this idea that this is obviously like chapter 8 of the Dalek serials, and yet you can pick this up and enjoy this and have fun with this, and you'll know that there's this animosity, but you don't need to know anything. You can't watch a random episode of Better Call Saul and do the same thing or any HBO series.
No, that's a really good point. Like you couldn't jump in at sort of like season 4 of The Sopranos and be like, right, I'm going to start from here. You know, like no, you have to know all the backstory. And like you say, this is just another adventure. It's a stepping stone, though, isn't it, towards that serial, like the more sort of serialized TV we've said. Like we've talked about previously, like Quatermass in the 50s. Like those stories didn't even have the same actor playing Quatermass in the TV shows. Like, they were supposed to all happen, but it was very loose. It was like, well, that was live and no one saw it. All right, well, we'll watch this other one and so on and so forth. And I suppose that was the same with this, but this seems to be that next level where fandom or pop, we said before, like the 60s into the 70s, sort of like pop culture sort of is picking up, These things are picking up. People are paying attention to Doctor Who. So it's obviously around this time that things like Lord of the Rings was getting reread and all this other stuff. So
and
people are getting into
it.
Yeah, the conventions have started. Star Trek's now happened. These things are being identified, and so they're recognizing, the people that are writing it are recognizing it and starting to build that in. So it's one step closer to what we're going to get. This very much continues through the 80s, but you get continuity in the 80s with other TV shows. But then in the 90s, obviously, where it kicks off, big time with like things like the X-Files, if you want to stick with science fiction and stuff, where continuity and wider stories become a much bigger thing. Buffy later on, that sort of thing. So it's a stepping stone towards that and towards Sopranos and Breaking Bad and all those others. So
yeah, while we're on the subject of continuity, I think both of us had this observation. The ending of this is that the Doctor is very self-satisfied that he has delayed the Daleks by, he estimates, 100 years.
He says 1,000 years is what he says.
Does he? Okay, well,
yeah,
but
even
so, right? I mean, multiple galaxies are going to be devastated by them. The other thing that I'm troubled by is, and I know this is such an inside baseball continuity issue, I love the first Dalek serial. And so much of what makes this one good is that it's got the Thals and it's, it has a starting point to then make a prequel of, right? It's not out of whole cloth. Yet that first Dalek serial can't have happened now.
Yeah.
I mean, we assume that's relatively close, but I mean, that could not have happened in the same way, which means that the Doctor didn't have that experience, which means that all the other serials didn't happen in that way, which means this serial couldn't have happened in that way. What the hell are we doing here, folks?
Well, yeah, and this is where we get into this whole thing around timey-wimey stuff that Doctor Who gets become so good at. Yes, I know what you mean, because I had the same thought actually, where it was like, well, if you put everything back 1,000 years, unless the Daleks can travel through time, then there's a whole bunch of stuff that just doesn't happen. And so does it change things? Or if you really want to go back to a determinate reality, this actually event always happened. That cave in at the end always happened. And actually, because the Doctor never says how far back they've gone, like he doesn't know how far back or whatever happened. So this may have always happened, and this may have always been the genesis of the Daleks. And actually, the delay is actually everything that he has actually experienced.
Yeah, and I like that idea. And I thought about that watching this. Like, right, we all know you're going to fail, right? Because the Daleks are going to show up again, right? Although there have been multiple serials that were written as the final, we're killing all the Daleks, even in New Who.
Yeah, they've done it like 4 times.
I know, and it gets to the point where I just don't want to see that. It's just lame.
Yeah.
But so you could get out of those things. But in a universe in which the Doctor has altered time and time clearly can be altered, how do you have this, sort of predestined thing?
Well,
where,
the only
of,
way I can do it, going back to headcanon again, is all those other times, or it's the majority of the times he's done that, he has intervened. He's been in the TARDIS and he's gone there and it's been the thing. He was pulled out of the TARDIS with his companions by this random Time Lord that we're told nothing about.
Who's straight out of the Seventh Seal.
Yeah. And so, you don't know his motivation. And so, again, headcanon, like he could be he could be the one that's like, actually, this needs to happen. This is a fixed moment in time, one of those time-wimey things. We need to make sure the Doctor arrives at this point in order to instigate these events.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that idea. I mean, that would be very cool.
Yeah. And we've seen that the Time Lords are manipulative and do this stuff. So, it can sort of fit with what they do. So that, again, in my headcanon, that's why everything happens in the way that it happens, is that it was always supposed to happen this way. But, yeah, I don't know. That's the only way it makes sense. To me, at least.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of have to say it's a pulp adventure. It's fun. There are ways that we can make this make more sense, but ultimately, it's fun. It's got a little bit of continuity to it, but it's light.
It is.
And at the end of the day, I mean, it's like straining these things too much, right? Like, we could talk about the depiction of the ableism of this episode, and that's all well and good, and that's quite correct, but that doesn't mean that this was intended to to bear that social weight. The intention, not that that's an excuse, those ableist things still are there, right? Objectively, but this was intended to be some pretty disposable fun, and I think, especially compared to past Doctor Who, that we've covered, it does seem to be doing sort of 90+% of what it intends to do.
Yeah, compared to, I have, we've talked about stuff, but I've not come in with the level of questions I had from Inferno, or the open-ended sort of like dropped threads that series had. No, I love this. I really enjoyed this serial. And this is, I can see why people have it up there as one of the best classic Who stories. I think it does stand up. I think it's like you say, it stands up, and you can understand some of the flaws of it because of the time period, because of the budgetary constraints, because of other things. It all makes sense. But I can imagine this story. If this story was done New Who in the Davies era or something, how this would be up there. Like, they would have knocked this out of the park, and they'd have addressed, this would be one of those amazing things. And that's what when we've gone back on this, and I've gone through the stories, I've done like little bits of side research and stuff, and they've covered all these bits and pieces off. It often amazes me how good New Who is and how they've connected some of the dots, because you do go back and you're like, wow, they must be real fans and real knowledge, because there's some stuff that they've addressed that, like I wouldn't even think of, but it's interesting.
Well, and I love that. And I think part of the fun of Doctor Who is that sort of tapestry of all of that continuity, even if it's not all needed, or you don't need to be aware of it all, and it's not all very tight. But I mean, part of the fun of Doctor Who is that longevity, and that even that variation of quality, sort of accepting, and this is very much my approach to franchises in general, is you accept the good with the bad. You don't get to say, I'm a huge fan of Alien, except for those Alien and Predator movies. Well, no, they made them, they might not be in continuity, but, I mean, you could say you don't like them, but, but don't say a true fan does this or a true fan does that. I mean, it's all, I love the Doctor Who. I mean, for as much as I hate the timey-wimey stuff, I love the idea of, no, it's all in continuity. And I think that is the right approach. And I love just looking at that massive thing that you've created. And Tom Baker is really the point at which sort of most would argue that it was sort of reaching its apex.
I would agree. And we'll round out now. I think we'll sort of come to an end. But one of the things, because we obviously are going to move on to the 5th, 6th, and 7th Doctors, and I know very little about the next 2 Doctors, other than they are a little controversial. Well, the next 3 Doctors really have their controversies, So it's going to be an interesting thing now, where I think you're right. I think we've sort of hit the classic era apex. You've got what is often, as you said, considered to be the top classic Doctor with the top classic story. So Genesis of the Daleks often, in a lot of the lists I saw, comes out as the classic Doctor Who story. It's sort of like the Dark Knight Returns of Doctor Who sort of stories for people. It's always
the best of both worlds of Yeah.
It's
I mean, and don't forget the one of the most probably the most popular companion too from the original.
Yes.
And I don't mean Harry.
Yeah. No one means Harry. Everyone forgets Harry. Talk about disposal. Even the Doctor's like, oh, you're here. Oh, well, yeah, you can come home too.
Didn't you just die? Oh, well, I guess I'll take you with me again.
Yeah. But yeah, so I'm really interested now to be entering this next stage of Who and the next couple of Doctors, which I think will, when we talk about the eccentricity, we're going to be really sort of like you chose
cranking that up to 11.
Yes, indeed. But any final thoughts for Genesis of the Daleks before we sort of wrap up?
It's better than I remember it, and I remembered it as good. But I think what you're saying is right, that if this were a New Who episode, what I'm struck by is how little rewrite you would need.
Yeah.
You'd need some things here and there. There's stuff you could cut, but this could very easily be a 2 or 3 parter. Other episodes we watch, other serials, and I think, okay, this is, maybe it's 8 episodes of half an hour each, and I think, well, this could be 4. You could cut this to 4 and not really miss that much. You're very comfortable at 6. Here, I think, no, I'd want it to be this length.
Mm-hmm.
And you can cut a few things and add a few things, but it really is of a different level, and it is better, if anything, than I remember.
Yeah, I'd agree. I really enjoyed revisiting this. I think there's some really good standout things. I think it's. I understand now why it's a defining story for many people for Classic Who. You're right though, like you say, there are some bits I would tweak. There's bits I think there's other bits that are just classic, that are just stand out. And also, like, to create a character like Davros so iconically, and then to give him the finale where they're like, "Oh, we may have killed him," is wonderful sort of, like, ending to it. So I think it's done very, very well. The thing I would highlight as well is, just wanted to wrap up, is how towards the end we've talked about how much killing goes on in this towards the end of the show. Nadir, it's called Nadir. The sort of like Davros' second in command sort of guy, how he sort of built up as this sort of like evil, and then just killed off, and it's wonderful. I like that like, no, this is where the Daleks are like dismissive and not, no pity, there's no remorse. Brilliant, and I enjoyed all of that. So yeah, I'm all on board for this episode or this serial, and it was great fun. But ladies and gentlemen, I'm hoping you're enjoying our sort of travels in the TARDIS through those classic Who stories. As I say, we'll be moving on to the 5th Doctor next, and
Earthshock.
Earthshock. That was just checking, which is considered to be the 5th Doctor's, or by many, the 5th Doctor's best story. So we shall see how that stands up. Other than that, if you like what we're doing, if you really enjoy what we're doing, go to your podcast catcher. Leave a review, 5 stars, 4 stars, but preferably 5 stars. Let us know what you think. We had a new one recently. Thank you very much for a recent review I saw on iTunes. Just to let you know, you did mention some things like, I do sniff quite a bit. I'm now addressing it. I'm loaded with drugs right now to address it. So I'm hoping it was better. But more than that, if you really like what we're doing, check out the Patreon. Julie and I are back on there working not just through another science fiction horror classic, The Twilight Zone, episode by episode. A similar discussion on there. Much shorter, little short bites. But they have been really good fun. So go check that out. There'll be a link down below.
Yeah, and the reviews really help, and we really appreciate it. It's not a lot of money, if you can't afford, 5 pence or £5 a month, you can, get a lot of content for that and really make a difference for us keeping the lights on.
It does. Yeah, we're keeping all the lights on, and it allows us to sort of expand and do different bits and pieces. So anyway, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for listening in, and I hope you enjoy these bonus series, and we shall see you on the next episode.
There's something very important I forgot to tell you.
What?
Don't cross the streams.